Hello, YouTube. Michael Constantine here. For years, I have lobbied through letters to get CPS's powers curbed in the state of Texas and in other states across the country. The reason for this being that Child Protective Services and its various subsidiaries and departments across the country have long followed an unconstitutional investigative process that fails to observe basic due process or rule of law when they are engaging in these investigations. They would take retaliatory reports from total strangers without collecting any identifying information from them, effectively allowing the agency to be used for limitless swatting calls. Until they ended anonymous reporting in Texas on an annual basis, just in the case of 2022, there were over 12,000 reports, and only 1,000 of those were verified, meaning that people had called the hotline over 10,000 times on a false basis, over 11,000 times, in fact. And they had used the agency and their investigative process to attack innocent people or people against whom they had grudges or they had an ulterior motive for those calls against. People who were functioning in a landlord capacity who wanted their tenants gone, people who disliked someone or had some specific grudge against somebody who had contacted authorities for help regarding crime victimization against them. These various different individuals, for a lot of different reasons, sometimes for racial reasons, would call the agency and they would use the agency on an anonymous basis without providing any name or identifying information as a weapon of attack against people who had children in order to swat them thousands of times. Now imagine that you're a good person that's trying to do something to make a difference and it's controversial. That is the position that I found myself in with the work that I was doing to help children. I won't say at this point in time exactly what it was, only that it leaped law enforcement and other agencies ahead drastically in terms of solving certain crimes. And it made me a target. It made my people a target for criminal aggression to such a degree that I was forced to leave my home. I lost my home as a result of that. I couldn't get retaliation protection from law enforcement or other agencies that I asked for it from. And it's an absolutely unjust outcome because the type of person that I am, I'm a really good person. And I really cared about making a difference. And I did. But the agency was used more than a dozen times over the course of 4 years to attack my household. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote them so much. And this had been something that had happened to me for a long, long time, even before that, without consistency. The main problem was that anytime that somebody would get upset with me or get pissed off, or they wanted to get rid of us because they had some grudge for whatever reason. In one case, it was a landlord. We kept filing complaints about the conditions of the property that we were on. It was unsafe. We had mold. People were selling drugs. They were using drugs out there openly. And we had a violent neighbor who had an aggressive pet. And I kept trying to follow the proper channels without going to law enforcement. And property management did not want to address our concerns. So after several dozen, it was probably 4 or 5 dozen different concerns that we had. Some of them were the same over and over again over the course of years. Management eventually targeted my family in that way using the agency, and they got rid of us. It worked. They put us deeply into debt. We lost all of our life savings, and we spent a year and a half fighting the agency. They were used as a nuclear weapon against my family. Our story is very, very extreme because the consequences are very great. People died. People ended up in the hospital. And the agency was an enemy throughout that entire process. They're a fucking menace. That's the truth. I'm not going to cut any corners and say it any kind of other way because there's just no other way to put it. They don't help people. They destroy families. They're evil, and they need to be stopped. And that is what I've been writing letters for years in order to do, to try to curb their power and get law enforcement to focus on people who are actual criminals, actual offenders that are weaponizing children's services against innocent people and families. And it was such a victory seeing Texas pass that piece of legislation because there are 50 other states, well, there's 49 other states, and in all these other places, it's the same stories across the entire country. I read the news every day, and I see what's happening to people. Children's services is being used as a weapon to hurt people, innocent people who oftentimes haven't done anything except they've pissed somebody off, and usually it's some crook or some scoundrel or somebody who's done something underhanded or illegal, and the people see that the family has children, and so they attack them on the basis that they have kids, using false reporting or anonymous reporting to some office in some state with Child Protective Services. And the organization on the backside of it, the state, they're looking to make as much money as they can off these children. And they want to make as much money as they can off the parents. And the assumption is that these parents can pay, and that's what the state is looking for. They try to get child support, and they try to demand that you pay for not one or two, but 3 different forms of insurance, the exact same policies, one under each individual who is working. At one point, my wife and I were both being garnished when I had a wife before she died. And that's another story. And it's all related to the same thing, the agency and its failures. All of it. They're monsters. They destroy innocent people. They destroy victims. They hurt them instead of helping them. And ending anonymous reporting is a huge victory, forcing them to follow a due process disclosure and provide a constitutional observance, inform parents of their constitutional rights, their due process rights. That is such a huge win for innocent people. Now that I know what I do, I know that they can be stopped. We can stop them. All of us. Americans can stop the agency from abusing them. There are crimes that are committed out there and bad things do happen. But over 80% of reports that are made are proven unfounded. So what does that tell you about how the agency is being used against Americans? A lot of people will agree, and I'm not going to get political here, except to say that there are various agencies in government who are being used as a weapon against the American people. And this is the biggest offender of all of them. Health and Human Services, Child Protective Services, subsidiaries of Health and Human Services across the United States are a menace. They're a menace to society. They're a menace to freedom. They're a destroyer of families, and they're a trafficker of children on a large scale. It's the largest, most profitable child trafficking organization in the country, and it's government run. And they don't help families. They don't. They destroy them. They leave people in extremely terrible emotional and psychological health after putting them through the trauma of terrorizing them and kidnapping their children and demanding they do these redundant classes that don't teach you shit. And it's just a horrific experience. They're abominable. They're monstrous. And as time goes on and I share more details of what they're doing to people, you're going to understand exactly just how bad that things are. I mean, it is really, truly terrible. There are kids who are dying because they're being removed from their parents. They're taken into foster care and they're placed in abusive homes and they are being killed. They're getting sick. Their homes are burning down with them inside. Sometimes more than one child is killed in these situations. I was reading a story not that long ago about 6 of them. And yes, I do wander a bit here when I'm sharing these stories because it all leads back to the same thing. The agency is not helping families. They're not providing any services. They're just trafficking kids. They're shifting them around for money. And they're expensing the parents as much as possible. They're hiring private contractors who more than likely provide kickbacks to the agency in exchange for having those exclusive service contracts to teach these classes with 40 and 50-year-old videos about toxic culture and toxic family. I've seen it. I've seen the materials. I know exactly what they're doing to people. I've been through that. And it's trash. The agency is trash and needs to be stopped any way possible. Fight them any way that you can. Don't cooperate with them. They're an enemy to America. They're an enemy to the American people. They're an enemy to families.